So let's talk through a comparison of, kind of recap what we've just seen, talk through a comparison of the imaging technologies and some of their advantages and disadvantages. And I've got some of the key features that you may be interested in the rows labeled on the left-hand side here. So we're interested in features like human safety, the lifetime of the sensor, how much maintenance it requires, whether that sensor is sensitive to ambient light. That can be a problem in warehouses or distribution centers where there's varying light levels. And then we'll talk about the features of penetration of materials, image type, whether it's 2D or 3D, and the resolution that you can achieve. And this is a very general view of the world, but the fundamental physics of these sensors are all the same no matter which manufacturer you're working with. So from a human safety perspective, of course, ordinary cameras are safe for human workers. No shielding is required. But if you look at X-ray sensors, they do require shielding to keep people away from the X-ray source. There are also OSHA and FDA regulations for the use of X-rays in industrial facilities. So in addition to shielding, you're also required to have a site license for the use of that X-ray equipment. And OSHA and FDA require that you have a radiation safety officer identified who will make sure that the equipment is operating safely over time. For example, if you have a worker that removes a piece of shielding, that could cause harm to other workers who are nearby because the X-rays are no longer shielded, and that can be a dangerous condition. So a radiation safety officer is required to periodically check the equipment, make sure it's operating properly. So the mmWave sensor doesn't require shielding because it's radio waves. They're very low energy. They don't ionize your cells or cause tissue damage. They're safe without shielding, just the same as a camera. Another feature you may be interested in is the lifetime of the sensor. So both cameras and mmWave sensors have an unlimited lifetime. There's nothing to wear out. They're just electronics. The sensor will operate until it either gets too dirty to operate or until somebody runs into it with a forklift. But in contrast, an X-ray sensor has internal parts that have a limited lifetime. The X-ray source inside typically has a lifetime limit. And so that will turn into requirement for periodic maintenance, both from a safety perspective and for an operation perspective for the X-ray sensors. And of course, that turns into different maintenance requirements. Cameras and mmWave, again, are low maintenance sensors. There's nothing to break or wear out. But again, X-rays have a high maintenance requirement. And then, as you know, cameras are sensitive to ambient light, and that can be a problem in warehouses or distribution centers where there's constantly varying lighting in the facility, either because outside light from sunlight is coming in, or because the lighting conditions are changing as things move around in the distribution center, or maybe as interior light bulbs burn out. So that can cause problems with the performance of a camera-based system. Additionally, cameras can be sensitive to excess light. So if you have something come through, let's say a light source on a vehicle, something like that, that can cause a problem also because the sensors are sensitive to ambient light. Contrasting with that, neither X-rays nor mmWave sensors care about the ambient light. They're not sensitive to ambient light and don't have those problems. And then, of course, we come to the reason why mmWaves are interesting. As we know, cameras see only the surface of packaged items. You cannot see the inside of packaged items with an ordinary camera, but you can with both X-ray systems and mmWave systems. And so the specific limitation of mmWave systems is they can see through most non-metallic packaging materials like corrugated cardboard, paper, glass, plastic, wood, and so forth. mmWave sensors can see metal objects, but they cannot see through metal objects. So that can be a limitation in some use cases if you're looking at metal objects and you need to see through them. The solution to that is to use a tunnel configuration where you're looking at packaged items from multiple viewpoints. Those multiple viewpoints can be fused together into a single 3D image, and that gets around the problem of millimeter waves not penetrating metals. And then finally, as we've talked about before, there are both 2D and 3D cameras. 2D cameras are ordinary cameras like you might have in a smartphone. 3D cameras are sometimes called depth cameras. They either use stereo vision or they use a special sensor called a structured light sensor to get 3D information. They do so at pretty high resolution. You can see very fine features with a ordinary optical camera, somewhere between, let's say, 0.1 and 1 millimeter resolution would be typical. With X-rays, most X-ray systems are 2D X-ray systems. They have also fairly good resolution, but are 2D sensors. And then millimeter wave sensors, again, are 3D sensors. They have somewhat less resolution than an ordinary camera. They may have a resolution, let's say, between 5 and 10 millimeters. So they can see many of the features of ordinary packaged goods, but they cannot see fine structure that you might have on the inside of some item. So if, let's say you're imaging a watch, you will not be able to see the tiny little components that are inside the watch, but you'll be able to see that there's a watch there.